It was not supposed to be her stop. Amara had been on the 97 bus since Finch Station, standing near the back doors with her grocery bags cutting into her palms, telling herself she would get off at Jane and just walk the rest. Her feet hurt. She had been on her feet since 6 in the morning. First at the laundromat folding other people's clothes, then at the community center kitchen serving lunch to seniors. And now it was past 4. And her back was doing that thing it did lately, that low, quiet ache that she had learned to ignore. She was almost past her stop when she saw the old man. He was sitting on the bench outside the Shoppers Drug Mart on Wilson, and something about him was wrong. Not wrong like he was sleeping, wrong like he had gone very still in a way that sleeping people do not go still. His chin was dropped to his chest, and his hand, the one resting on his cane, had gone slack. A plastic bag from the pharmacy sat at his feet, undisturbed. Amara got off the bus. She did not think about it the way people think about things before doing them. She just stepped off and let the doors close behind her and crossed the sidewalk to where he was sitting. She put her groceries down. She touched his shoulder. "Sir," she said. "Sir, can you hear me?" His breathing was there, shallow and uneven, but his eyes did not open. She looked around. 2 teenagers walked past with their hoods up, not looking. A woman in a yellow parka glanced over and then looked away. Amara called out to her anyway. "Can you call 911, please? This man needs help." The woman hesitated, then pulled out her phone. Amara stayed beside him. She did not know his name. She did not know if he had anyone to call. She loosened the scarf around his neck because it looked tight, and she had learned, years ago back home in her mother's kitchen, that when someone goes faint, you give them air first. She held his wrist loosely, feeling for a pulse the way Mama Josephine had taught her. Mama Josephine, who was not a nurse, just a woman who had seen enough of life to know what mattered. The ambulance came in under 7 minutes. The paramedics were efficient and kind. One of them, a young man with red hair, told Amara she had done the right thing by keeping him still and not moving him. He said it like it was a small thing. Amara nodded and picked up her grocery bags and caught the next bus home. She did not think about it again until her shift the next morning. Amara had been working at Clearview Home Care for 2 years. It was not a glamorous job. She drove a second-hand Civic with a cracked rear bumper and visited elderly clients across the northwest end of the city. Helped them bathe, helped them eat, helped them remember what day it was and whether they had taken their medication. She had trained for it back home, had done 2 years of nursing coursework before the money ran out, and circumstances changed, and she found herself in Toronto with a study permit, a cousin's pull-out couch, and the specific kind of determination that only comes from having no other option. She liked the work. That was the honest truth, and she was not embarrassed by it. She liked Mr. Anderson on Beech Grove, who always had the CBC on, and wanted to tell her about the hockey game, even when she did not know the teams. She liked Mrs. Okafor on Dufferin, who kept a photograph of her late husband on the mantel, and talked to it sometimes when she thought no one was listening. She liked being useful in a way that was real and immediate. Not abstract, not delayed, but right there in someone's kitchen at 8 in the morning, making sure they were okay. What she did not like was her supervisor, Mr. Hollins. Mr. Hollins had been with Clearview for 11 years. He had a habit of walking into rooms a few seconds after things had already happened, so that his version of events was always slightly off, and he had the particular confidence of someone who had never been wrong in his own telling of any story. He did not like Amara. She had understood this early on, not because he ever said anything direct, but because of the way he scheduled her. The worst shifts, the clients farthest from transit, the last-minute changes that left her scrambling. She had never said anything. She had learned which fights to save her energy for. That morning, she arrived at her first client's house at 7:55, 5 minutes early, which was how she always arrived. She was in the middle of helping Mrs. Tran with her morning routine when her phone rang. It was the office, Amara. Mr. Hollins' voice was the kind of flat that people use when they have already decided something. "We need you to come in when you finish at Mrs. Tran's. Is everything all right? Just come in." She finished with Mrs. Tran. She made sure the medication was taken, the kettle was on, the television was set to the right channel. Then she drove to the Clearview office on Dufferin, and sat across from Mr. Hollins in the small meeting room that smelled like old carpet and someone's lunch. He told her that a complaint had been filed. Amara sat very still. The complaint, he said, came from a family member of one of her clients. It alleged that certain items, a watch, some cash from an envelope in a kitchen drawer, had gone missing after Amara's visits. The family had spoken to head office. Head office had asked Mr. Hollins to investigate. "I didn't take anything," Amara said. "I'm not saying you did." "Then what are you saying?" He looked at the papers in front of him. He said it was a serious allegation. He said Clearview had a responsibility to its clients and to its reputation. He said that pending the outcome of the investigation, she would be placed on unpaid suspension. Amara asked who had made the complaint. He said he was not able to share that. She asked when the items had supposedly gone missing. He said he was not able to go into specifics at this time. She asked what she was supposed to do while the investigation took place. How long? What process? Who was overseeing it? He gave her a printed sheet of paper with a phone number on it and said someone from HR would be in touch. She drove home. She sat in the parking lot of her building for a long time before going inside. The investigation took 3 weeks. No one from HR called in the first week. When Amara called the number on the sheet, she was put on hold twice and then told someone would follow up. The follow-up came 4 days later, a brief email asking her to submit a written statement, which she did. 3 pages, careful and detailed and honest. She heard nothing after that. Meanwhile, the rent was due. The Civic needed brake pads. She had been sending money home every month. Not much, but steady. And now that Stream had stopped, and she did not know how to tell her mother that. She picked up shifts at a grocery store on Lawrence. It paid less, the hours were harder, and the manager was 19 years old and could not look her in the eye when he spoke to her. But it was money. She worked the early stocking shift from 4 to 10 in the morning, and then tried to sleep in the afternoon, which she was not good at, and then lay awake thinking about things she could not fix. She did not tell many people what was happening. Her cousin Emeka knew, and her friend Diane, who she had met at a settlement workshop in her first year in Toronto. Diane brought her jollof rice one evening and sat with her in her small apartment and said, in the way Diane always said difficult things, "Amara, this is not about the watch." "I know," Amara said. "You know what you have to do, I know." She had already started looking for a lawyer. Legal Aid had a wait list. One of the community legal clinics near Eglinton could see her in 6 weeks. She wrote everything down. Dates, times, what was said, by whom. She kept every email. She made a folder on her phone with photographs of all the timesheets she had submitted. She did not cry about it, mostly. There were 1 or 2 nights when something gave way and she let it. And then she got up and made herself tea and sat by the window and watched the street below until she felt steady again. She had learned that steadiness was something you made, not something you waited for. 3 weeks after the suspension, she got a call from a number she did not recognize. She almost let it go to voicemail. She was at the grocery store, on her break, eating a sandwich in the back room. But something made her answer. "Is this Amara Sikalo?" The voice was a man's, older, with a slight accent she could not immediately place. Francophone, maybe. Quebec or West Africa. "Yes," she said carefully. "My name is Olivier Beaumont. I believe you helped my father 3 weeks ago, on Wilson Avenue." Amara went very still. "He was on the bench," she said. "Outside the Shoppers." "Yes," a pause. "He had a small stroke. He is recovering now, but the doctors told us that if he had been left alone for much longer." He stopped, started again. "I have been trying to find you for some time. The paramedics remembered a young woman who was with him when they arrived, but they did not have your name. Someone at the shelter nearby thought they recognized you from the neighborhood." "A friend of a friend?" He let out a quiet breath. "I am sorry. This must sound very strange." "No," Amara said. "How is he?" "He is better, frustrated. He is not a patient man." There was something in his voice, a warmth underneath the formality. "He wants to meet you. He has asked me many times." He does not let things go easily." Amara said she was glad his father was recovering. She said it had not been anything remarkable, she had just stopped. She said it the way she meant it. Olivier Beaumont said, gently, "I think we have a different definition of remarkable." She met them on a Saturday, at a house in Rosedale, that she found by following her phone's GPS, and then double-checking the address 3 times, because it did not seem like a place she would be invited to. It was a tall Victorian, dark brick, with maple trees along the front walk and a black door that opened before she had a chance to ring the bell. The man who opened it was in his mid-50s, well-dressed in the way that people are when dressing well has become habit rather than effort. He introduced himself as Olivier. He shook her hand. He looked at her with an attention that was not intrusive but was very present, like someone who was used to understanding people quickly. His father, Mr. Gaston Beaumont, was sitting in a chair in the front room, with a blanket over his knees, and an expression that suggested the blanket had been placed there by someone else, and he had not consented to it. He was a small man, thin, with white hair and eyes that were dark and sharp, and missed nothing. "Sit down," he said, in English with a strong French inflection before Amara had fully entered the room. She sat. "You were the one on the bench," he said. "Yes." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "Tell me about yourself." It was not what she had expected. She had expected gratitude, graceful, brief, the kind of thing you accept and move on from. She had not expected to be asked a question that required an actual answer. She told him carefully and honestly where she was from, how long she had been in Toronto, what she did for work, or what she had done. "You said had done," he said. "I'm on suspension." He asked her why. She told him. She did not soften it or dramatize it. She stated the facts the same way she had in her written statement, the allegation, the timeline, the lack of process, the phone number that had led nowhere. Gaston Beaumont listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he looked at his son. Olivier was already looking at him. "This Clearview," Gaston said. "You know what kind of company they are?" Olivier nodded slowly. "I know the sector." Amara looked between them. She did not know what was being communicated in that exchange, but she could feel the weight of it. She found out later, not that day, but over the weeks that followed, that Gaston Beaumont had spent 40 years building a group of companies that operated across healthcare staffing, senior residential care, and community health services in Quebec and Ontario. He had started with nothing, the son of Haitian immigrants who had settled in Montreal in the 60s, and had built something that now employed several thousand people across 2 provinces. He was not famous in the way that some business people were famous. He was known in his industry and in certain rooms, and he had the specific gravity of someone who has never needed to be louder than necessary. He was also, Amara learned, 72 years old and recently widowed and stubborn, in the way that her mother's generation called a compliment, and the generation after that called a problem. He had been on Wilson Avenue that afternoon because he had insisted on taking the bus to his doctor's appointment despite his son's objections, because he had always taken the bus and he saw no reason to stop. He had been sitting on that bench because he had not been feeling well and had thought he just needed a moment. He had nearly died on a bus bench because he was too proud to ask for a ride. This was information Amara received over time, in pieces, during what became a series of Saturday visits that she had not planned for and could not entirely explain to herself. She was not sure at first why she kept going. Rosedale was a long drive. Gaston was not easy company in the conventional sense. He asked difficult questions and did not accept vague answers, and had opinions about everything from transit policy to the quality of bread in Toronto, which he found disappointing. But there was something that she recognized in him, a specific kind of person who believed that doing things correctly was not separate from doing things kindly, who thought that integrity was not a quality you performed, but a practice you maintained whether or not anyone was watching. She told him once, near the beginning, that she had stopped because she could not have not stopped, that it had not been a decision exactly. He had looked at her with those sharp, dark eyes and said, "That is the correct answer." The investigation at Clearview concluded 5 weeks after her suspension began. She received a letter informing her that no evidence had been found to support the allegation and that she was cleared to return to work. It was 3 paragraphs, formal and impersonal, and it contained no apology. Mr. Hollins did not call. No one from HR called. The letter arrived by email on a Tuesday afternoon, and that was that. Amara read it twice. Then she put her phone face down on the kitchen table and sat with it for a while. She thought about Mrs. Tran, who had probably been assigned someone else for 5 weeks and might have had to learn a new person's rhythms. She thought about Mr. Anderson and the hockey updates she had missed. She thought about the brake pads on the Civic that she had been putting off, and the money she had borrowed from Emika that she had not yet paid back, and the 6 weeks of unpaid suspension that she would never recover. She thought about what it meant to be cleared of something you had never done. She called Olivier Beaumont. She did not call to ask for anything. She called because she had told him she would let him know the outcome, and she was someone who kept that kind of promise. She told him the investigation was over and she was cleared. Olivier was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Amara, my father and I have been talking. We would like to discuss something with you, if you are open to it." What they proposed over the course of 2 conversations was this. Gaston's company had a training and placement division, a branch that recruited and supported home care workers, particularly internationally trained health professionals who were navigating Canadian credential recognition. It was understaffed and underperforming, and Gaston had been thinking for some time about restructuring it. He wanted someone with direct experience in home care, with the kind of judgment that came from doing the actual work, not just managing it on paper. Someone who understood what the job felt like from the inside. He was not offering her a favor. He was very clear about that, in the direct way. He was clear about everything. He told her that he had made inquiries, had spoken to the families of several of her former clients, had looked at her employment record before the suspension. He said the offer was based on what he had found, not on what she had done for him on Wilson Avenue. "Those are 2 different things," he said. "I know," Amara said. "One does not obligate the other. I understand." He looked at her for a moment and then seemed satisfied. "Good," he said. "Then we can talk about the role." The role was a coordinator position, program coordinator for the placement division, with a salary that made Amara go very still for a moment when Olivier mentioned it. There would be training. There would be a pathway, Gaston said carefully, towards something more senior if the fit was right. He did not make promises he could not keep. He told her that directly as well. She asked for a week to think about it. She spent the week being thorough. She talked to Diane, who said, "Amara, what is there to think about?" She talked to Emeka, who said the same thing more loudly. She called the legal clinic she had been waiting to hear from and told them she no longer needed the appointment. She called the grocery store and gave her notice. And the 19-year-old manager said okay, and that was the end of that. She drove by the bus stop on Wilson Avenue on Thursday evening. She was not sure why. She parked across the street and looked at the bench for a minute. There was someone else sitting on it, a woman with shopping bags, looking at her phone. Normal, unremarkable, the kind of moment that happens 10,000 times a day in a city and means nothing, and then occasionally means everything. She drove home. On Friday morning she called Olivier and told him yes. Her first day at Beaumont Group was on a Monday in early November, when the leaves were mostly down, and the air had that particular sharpness that Toronto gets when winter is no longer a distant idea, but an immediate fact. She wore the green blazer she had bought from a second-hand shop on Bloor 3 years ago, and had been saving for an occasion she could not yet name. She took the subway, and then walked the last 4 blocks, because she wanted to arrive on her own terms. The office was on King Street, on the 5th floor of a building that smelled like copper and woodwork. Olivier met her in the lobby and walked her up. The team was small, 6 people in the placement division, a mix of ages and backgrounds, and they welcomed her with the particular warmth of people who had been told she was coming and had been curious about her. Gaston was not in the office that day. He did not come in every day, but he had left something on her desk. A small envelope with her name written on it in handwriting that was careful and slightly old-fashioned, the way people wrote when they had learned to write before computers. Inside was a note. 4 sentences. You stopped when you did not have to. You spoke when it would have been easier not to. You were honest when dishonesty would have cost you less. That is not nothing, Amara. That is, in fact, everything. She read it twice. Then she put it in her blazer pocket. She would keep it there for the rest of the day. and for many days after that, a small, solid thing to reach for. When the work was hard, or the city felt indifferent, or she needed to remember that she had already survived the worst version of things. Outside the fifth-floor window, the lake was visible between the buildings, grey and wide and cold. The city moved below the way it always moved, fast and without looking up. Somewhere on Wilson Avenue, the 97 bus was making its run north, and someone, somewhere, was deciding whether to get off one stop early. Amara sat down at her desk and got to work.